Right behind me on the screen today, and which we're going to showcase on the screen for you, is an effort of a campaign that we appeal to every single person watching this in every part of the globe, and 80% of the people who watch us on YouTube are from other parts of the world. Help us make this a viral campaign. Because for so many years, the Chinese keep lecturing to the world on their own assumption of what a world map with a China in it must look like. This assumption is flawed. It is based on occupation. It is based on mistruths. The Chinese have managed to ensure that on the global fraternity, India and its state of Jammu and Kashmir, now a union territory, in global maps is shown as Indian occupied Kashmir. But they won't tell you that in the reality of the formation of the People's Republic of China, they are the real occupiers of vast swathes of territory. Proper China as it exists only exists on the 1/3 of the eastern seaboard of China. Everything else is Chinese occupied territory. This was not part of the Han homeland. It played little part in the dynasties. They built a great wall for Pete's sake over their northern borders, and yet they claim that anything north of this is an autonomous province. The entire area of the Chinese northeast, erstwhile Manchuria, was handed over to them by the Soviets. This is the reality which we need to explore in depth, and let's take that effort. Here on your screens now is a map we've put together of what real China actually looks like. Towards the northwest is Chinese occupied East Turkestan, that roughly makes up the so-called Chinese province of Xinjiang. Within it lies Chinese occupied Ladakh, Chinese occupied Shaksgam, and the Chinese occupied Pamir Valley, which they have taken from the Tajiks. Further towards the border with India is Chinese occupied Tibet, and the original maps of Tibet reflect not the Chinese divisions. The Chinese have two divisions. They call it Xizang and Qinghai. Xizang and Qinghai are both Tibet. In fact, large parts of the Chinese province of Sichuan and parts of another Chinese province just shy of Inner Mongolia are also part of the Tibetan plateau and original Tibet. This is the physicality. You can't change the physicality of the Tibetan plateau, which is the originating point of all the great rivers of Asia, including the Yellow, the Yangtze, the Mekong, and the Brahmaputra. Further towards the north, north of Beijing and the Great Wall of China, the Chinese have an autonomous quote-unquote region that they call Nemangol, Inner Mongolia. This is actually Chinese occupied South Mongolia. Mongolia exited after the collapse of the imperial dynasty of China in 1911 and formed a khanate under Babt Khan. Further towards the northeast are the three Chinese provinces of Jilin, Liaoning, and Heilongjiang. This is Chinese occupied Manchuria. To the south of the coast lies Taiwan or Formosa, which is the People's Republic of China. And to the east of the border of Myanmar lies Chinese occupied Yunnan, which was also not part of China after the imperial dynasty collapsed in 1911. And at the bottom you have Chinese occupied Hong Kong and Macau, and you know what's happening in Hong Kong right now. This is what makes up what China should actually look like in a global map. And it is the success of the Chinese ability at obfuscation, at gamesmanship, at stubbornness, that many of us watching here would not have known any of this. We would not have known that proper China, China proper, only consists of 18 provinces on the eastern seaboard. Modern day China is built around the 3 northeastern provinces, which are Manchuria, and the 5 autonomous regions. Put together, these areas are 7 million square kilometers of territory, as opposed to just over 10 million square kilometers that makes up what they call the People's Republic of China. That is, 2/3 of the territory was never part of China proper. Tibet is occupied. If you go to Urumqi or if you go to Kashgar, the cultural capital of Xinjiang, the local people are not Han Chinese. They identify themselves as East Turkestanis or Uyghurs or Uyghuristan. Towards the north are the Mongols. Towards the northeast, the Manchu people, Korean descent. And I'm going to go through this one by one, province by province. Let me also get in my colleague Gauri, who is joining us on the broadcast, as well as Ambassador Baswati Mukherjee, Madam Nalapat is joining us, and Major General Dhruv Katoch is also with us. I'm going to go through this province by province. But before that, Ambassador Mukherjee, how important is it now that we simply tell the truth? This is what China is, and call the bluff on the quote-unquote autonomous regions.
I think, Rishabh, first of all, let me congratulate you for highlighting something which should be known not just by the Indian public but globally, which is that actually the Chinese are sitting on huge amounts of occupied territory, and it's not just Hong Kong which is an issue, or Macau. They also have huge problems, as you rightly pointed out, in their outlying areas, where they've also now been exposed for ill-treating their minorities, both religious and ethnic. Therefore, for them to have the gall to show our Kashmir as occupied territory, I fully agree with you, needs to be exposed. Now the issue is, how do we expose it? It's a difficult choice, and we need to do it in a strategic manner. First of all, we perhaps need to take a much harder line with the Chinese, as we have been doing under Prime Minister Modi, in the various UN forums where China's misdeeds are being highlighted, be it the Human Rights Council or other groups where the various groups have been coming up, showing the kind of ill treatment, the discrimination, the blatant violation of a permanent member of the Security Council. Secondly, we need to do a propaganda campaign, and that propaganda campaign can be organized both in India and by Indian overseas organizations outside who are just dying to have a go at them. So this is something again that we need to think about. But it's a strategic decision, Rishabh, because militarily we are not yet their equal. So when we do something with the Chinese, we need to work it out just as they do it, point by point, one step forward, one step back, to know how far we can push them. Should we take a step back at the right time, etc., etc. So just like they like to play great games, it's time for India to play a great game. And one great way of doing it is actually to highlight this map. And this can be done in so many ways, which I'm sure my colleagues also who are joining me will agree with me, that this map itself is an eye-opener. And this map will have a huge impact on the Chinese, because that's another thing. They have a very thin skin, and they don't like to be singled out.
Well, if they want to be respected in terms of their positions, let them be truthful about their positions and be respectful of other people's positions as well, which they choose not to do. Let me quickly get in Professor Madhav Nalapat. Professor Madhav Nalapat, there are many countries, small powers, big powers, great powers across the globe, who have many skeletons in their cupboards that they need answering, whether it be the English over Scotland and Northern Ireland, whether it be the Canadians over Quebec, the Turks over Armenia, Kurdistan, many countries have answerability to do. I am not suggesting that India at one point of time was not made up of many kingdoms. But the reality is that China today itself identifies 5 major autonomous regions and has separate classifications for erstwhile Manchuria, which are their northeastern provinces. China proper only consisted of 18 provinces on the eastern seaboard, and they by far are the richest areas of China.
Well, I think, 1947, India got its freedom. Our freedom fighters were not able to keep the country from being divided. It was divided. And unfortunately, the very, very strategically important POK, Gilgit, Baltistan, etc., very, very strategically important. I mean, frankly, the leadership in India allowed that to go to Pakistan without even a fight. I think the Chinese would have learned some lessons from this divided subcontinent. Had there been a united subcontinent, it would have immediately emerged as a very powerful force in global geopolitics. And in 1949, Mao did not make any such a similar situation. He basically, as you correctly said, he moved to integrate Tibet, Xinjiang, Manchuria, Inner Mongolia, you name it. I mean, I don't think Taiwan is a priority for Mao ever, so that's why he probably didn't pay much attention, and he did once or twice. But then I think the Americans finally woke up and took some action, so nothing happened. It was, but barring that, as you correctly said, all these territories were taken over. Now, I mean, so their experience, frankly, is the exact opposite of our experience. And let me say, Rishabh, very clearly that, there are people all over the world who will really watch your map. There are people all over the world who are designing maps in a sense very similar to this. And there are also, I think there are maybe NGOs and other groups trying hard to work towards what they believe will lead to this map becoming reality. And the only way it can become reality is the collapse of the Chinese Communist Party rule in China. Now, imperial rule collapsed, it led to major problems. KMT rule collapsed, it led to a completely different situation. So quite frankly, if these maps are ever to come true, and there are quite a lot of people in multiple countries, people that, I'm sure all of us have met, who are really, very keen on this coming true. But the only way that can come true is if the Communist Party collapses. And I must tell you, Rishabh, whether it is in Tibet, whether it is in Manchuria, whether it is in Inner Mongolia, I frankly see no sign that China, the Beijing's position is weak.
Is weaker. In fact, it's
weaker.
Strengthening.
And the same thing with Xinjiang.
And it's strengthening. They have done the demographic change. They are building. And for a lot of people watching this broadcast, the Silk Road or the new Silk Road and OBOR are as much as about zipping together China as they are about putting trade centers all across the world. The new Silk Road runs through Kashgar. Kashgar is here. Okay, just north of Aksai Chin. Kashgar is the end point of the CPEC and the beginning point of the Xinjiang Tibet highway. And the new Silk Road will have to run just north of it, going into Central Asia and into Russia. So the Chinese, who have underdeveloped the West, where all the riches have gone to the eastern provinces along the seaboard, for them it is equally important to get these new Silk Road OBORs done as much as they're about to occupy their own territories or what they claim as their own territories, than to be looking globally. So let's do this bit by bit. At the center of your screens, let's examine proper China here. This deals with the 18 provinces: Anhui, Chile, Fujian, Gansu, Guangdong, Guizhou, Hebei, Henan, Hubei, Hunan, Jiangsu, Jiangxi, Shaanxi, Shandong, Sichuan, and Zhejiang, with parts of Yunnan that makes up proper China. This is what maps of China look like. earlier. Everything north is Tartary, everything west is Tibet, away from these 18 provinces. This is what China looked like 100 years ago. Here's another map of China and of India. Everything north of Nepal is Tibet. In this map, there is no China because it lies too far to the east. Tibet. That's an American map, by the way. Here's another one. French map of Southeast Asia. The yellow territory is China proper. All the eastern seaboard. Towards the northwest is the Tatar Independent, and towards the north of that, the Tatars, the Mongols. Let me get in General Dhruv Katoch. General Dhruv Katoch, at this point of time, the premise is simple. China needs to answer for its two policies, autonomous regions, which are all hogwash.
Yes, I totally agree with you. You know, Rishabh, I was just thinking, when you look at China and you look at the Great Wall which they made, now let us understand why so many centuries ago did they build that wall. They built that wall so that invaders could not come inside China. So everything outside the wall really was where they would say are the invaders or somebody else. Now, that really was not a part of China. That is why they built the wall. And then they realized that the wall, it doesn't matter how big they build the wall, whether it's 1,000 or a few thousand kilometers, the invader would always come in. And then they came to the second conclusion that to protect your core, your what you call your China, you've got to actually go out to the outer provinces. And that, of course, subsequently led to, when you look into 1950, they're coming into Tibet. And then, of course, they've taken Xinjiang. Now, these two provinces, as far as Tibet and Xinjiang are concerned, they're, of course, of direct concern to us. One of the reasons why Mao didn't take Taiwan when he did his Great March and was a very simple fact that the People's Liberation Army did not have a navy. So they had no ships actually to get across to Taiwan, which is why he stopped. He was a land-based fellow. Now, as far as we are concerned, I totally agree with you and with both the ambassador and Professor Nalapat. You know, the time has come now to actually show China the mirror and say, listen, you are the aggressor. You have been aggressing for the last 100 years, right? You have occupied Tibet, you have taken Xinjiang, you have taken so many other areas on your all around China. And they cannot now, at this point of time, start preaching to the world any concept of honesty or morality or something. They are the people who have actually violated all principles of civil behavior.
I think there's something called discourse domination, and they've been rather successful, General Katoch, at discourse domination. We are always on the defensive in talking about Jammu and Kashmir, about why India is not Islamophobic, why we are a diverse country, when the reality is that if you want a racial, eugenic, unipolar entity, that is the People's Republic of China, where there is a 90% singular majority and they
Yes.
do not take their minorities with any sense of the spirit of diversity, sir.
Yes, you see what has happened in Tibet. Look at the population density of Tibetans versus the Han Chinese in 1950 and today. See what they're doing actually even in Xinjiang province. The way the demographics have changed, I think it is a matter of shame. And as far as India is concerned, I think I have to confess we have a weakness. We have a weakness in our ability to shape the information environment. And this has been a weakness for quite some time. I mean, when you're looking at what is happening in Kashmir, I mean, everything which is right is with us. We have got the laws, we have got justice on our side. And yet you're trying to fight a battle which others are trying to dictate to you. I think this is absolutely outrageous, and we need to step up our effort as far as perception management is concerned, which I personally feel
Simply
remains
telling
a
the
weak
truth.
point.
Okay, let me take it. What I'm showing on your screens is Chinese occupied Manchuria. Let's keep it on our screens. PCR, let's put us into a PIP, please, and let's keep this on our screen. Chinese occupied Manchuria. Three provinces, Heilongjiang, Jilin and Liaoning. In Liaoning lies Mukden. Mukden in where is when 1931, the Japanese invasion force created something called the Mukden incident by blowing up their old railway lines as a pretext to cause the invasion of China. This was the frontline area contested by the Soviets and the Japanese. The first bullets in the Second World War were not fired in Poland. They were fired at the Battle of Khalkhin Gol. You can Google that for details. That happened here. The Soviets were fighting the Japanese here. The first province that was handed over to Mao Zedong's China was in the northeast, Heilongjiang. This province here. This became the first territory of the People's Republic of China because the Soviets, after having defeated the Japanese, gave it over to Mao. This was never part of the Han dynasty, not part of the Qing dynasty. These were areas that were Manchu people in the sense people of Korean descent. All these three provinces, and the only reason this is part of modern day China is because this was occupied by the Soviets. Let me put another map on our screens for our viewers joining us on the broadcast. Have a look at this. Okay. 1858 handed over to Russia. 1860 handed over to Russia by Treaty of Beijing. Okay, this is the Manchu dynasty, Outer Mongolia. Outer Tibet, 1911, Chinese imperial forces collapse. Xinjiang, 1911, de facto independent. Outer Mongolia, 1911, de facto independent. I mentioned Bob Khan, East Turkestan. This is the reality of China. Let me quickly get in Basmati Mukherjee, she wants to come in. Ma'am, if we do this province by province, we have more in Indian civilization has more in common with East Turkestan or Uyghuristan than the Chinese do. We have closer links. The Chagatai Turks are the same lineage, ironically, to whom the Mughals claim descent.
You're very right, Rishabh. You've put your finger on it as always. The strength of India is its multi-ethnicity, its multicultural civilizational fabric. The weakness of China is its inability to absorb its minorities seamlessly as we did, and to consider itself always as a Han civilization, although having absorbed so many other territories in order to, as General Katoch so correctly pointed out, to safeguard the interior, they still regard themselves overwhelmingly as a Han civilization. Now, they may have succeeded in Tibet because of changing the demography and because they forced the Dalai Lama to leave, but it's a much more difficult issue for them, not in Hong Kong, but in their restless Muslim minority provinces. And why do I say that? Because there will come a time when their ruthless repression of these minorities will cause a backlash in those very areas where they need a reach, which is Africa and the Arab countries where there are very large Muslim majorities, and in the West. And there will come a point of time when they will be unable to just repress them physically. So then there will be, for the first time in China in a very long time, there will be civil war conditions. The Chinese are neither good at controlling dissent. They believe that democracy is very dangerous, and they are not good. They feel that these kind of movements can only be handled by repression. Hong Kong is a good example of the fact that that has not worked. But in the final analysis, Hong Kong was a colonial outpost. It is not so important to China as their restless Muslim minorities. Correct. Which actually are far more important also politically. So therefore, you put your finger on it. The final decline of China will come when they will not be able to handle those contradictions, those fault lines, which are inherent and which are becoming stronger by the day.
And that's frankly their problem. Now for us it is very simply to call out the situation as it is, because we can't be living in such an informational vacuum where we are constantly on the defensive trying to explain our position, the Chinese should be explaining their position. This, ladies and gentlemen, from the Tibetan plateau towards the south go the three rivers. This is the Brahmaputra we are all familiar with. Here's a river we are not often familiar with, the Mekong, that goes with the Chinese have built 11 dams in Yunnan, 11 dams to control the Mekong, and completely ruined Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam because of this dam construction. The original Chinese state of proper China runs on the lower reaches, which are the eastern reaches of two rivers. One is the Yellow River, which goes towards the north, and the other is the Yangtze River, which ends up closer to Nanjing and Shanghai. That was China. I've already drawn for you that this here, just north of Beijing, is the Great Wall. Everything north of that was always Mongolia, until for some reason they chose to make it Inner Mongolia and called it an autonomous region, which is a lie. So the Chinese currently have 5 autonomous regions. One is Xinjiang here, one is Xizang, which is a part of Tibet that borders India. Then you have Mongolia, then Inner Mongolia, right towards the south of Inner Mongolia, over here Ningxia, okay, and Yunnan. Now there is a reason that these are autonomous provinces, because they were never part of China. The Republic of China of Sun Yat-sen was fighting wars here, and if you want further information, the most important one comes out to be that an individual infamous as Deng Xiaoping in 1929 tried to do a communist revolution in another area called Guangxi, which was again independent after the imperial dynasty collapsed, and that by the way, that communist coup didn't work out. So here is the particular position. Then towards the northeast, I've already mentioned, are the 3 eastern provinces which were never part of China. This is Manchuria. Not to say that the Japanese did a great service to Manchuria, they did not. But here's a reality check. Now, let me quickly address this before I have to take a break. Professor Nalapat, in terms of us always being on the defensive, because we are put on the mat, we are the ones dragged to the UN Security Council, we are the ones told that you are a dictatorship, you are becoming a Nazi regime, Indians are Islamophobes, by members of the Security Council, including China.
Well, Rishabh, I can only say that these epithets are thrown at various people. I mean, I've been called a Nazi, for example, by some individuals who have obviously not read one line of what I've been writing across the decades, and my very strong support for the Jewish people and also for the state of Israel. So, I mean, frankly, these are pretty, common abuses. I just want to say that, you're right. The Tibet, for example, I mean, we had some advantages in Tibet because during the British time, and those advantages were all given away by Jawaharlal Nehru. And that's not the end of the story. Over time, for example, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, if I remember, in 2003, he also made almost, whatever the Chinese needed on Tibet from India, Mr. Vajpayee gave them. So, and the point is very simple. Chinese diplomacy has been very clever across the last 100 years. For example, Mao and the Communist Party, there were so many Americans visiting them. And even after 1945, many Americans believed that they should support Mao, who was an agrarian reformer, rather than Chiang Kai-shek, who is admittedly a very corrupt, brutal tyrant. So the reality is that if you go to Yan'an, for example, Mao's hideout for so many years, you see so many photographs of Americans out there. So now, of course, things are changing. You have a US bill, for example, saying that Tibet is independent. Possibly some other representative will bring a bill saying Xinjiang is independent. Under Trump, the US is working very hard to try and bring down the Chinese economy in the belief that the economy is what sustains the Communist Party and the Chinese are fighting back. So today, you definitely have an all-out economic war between the US and China. But over time, I can tell you, they have been extremely smart at playing different countries. I want to finally say, look, I've been to Tibet multiple times. I've been traveling almost all over China. And quite frankly, if you're looking at Tibet, a large number of young Tibetans are now being educated in the school system and the university system of the Chinese state.
Correct.
And frankly, I mean, you know, I've talked to some of them. I don't think they have any sense of being very different, frankly. Maybe 30 years ago, 40 years ago,
That's it.
that would have been the case. But certainly now those disappear.
That's
those
it.
things are disappearing.
That's the long-term
Let us
planning.
recognize reality when reality hits us in the face. And again, I repeat, today the Americans are going all out against China. And the question which will need to be asked of Ambassador Mukherjee and everybody else, should India join that particular bandwagon or not?
Okay, let me put that. General Dhruv Katoch, in getting this information out there, because putting this out to us here in India, is 1.3 billion people, we're going to outnumber the Chinese any day now. And yet
We've
they
already
completely,
outnumbered them.
well, we outnumbered them now. To get this out there, General Katoch, is also the opinion that this now needs to be how the world should be looking at it, when all of them have been putting pressure on India for all these years.
No, I think that is very right. But I think the first step should be really public awareness. And one of the means of public awareness is really the media. The media is a very, very powerful instrument. And I think shows like this, if they are done in Hindi and in the regional languages, and if they are broadcast, it will bring that sense of information to the vast public. I think many people don't even realize that when you're looking at Kashgar, Khotan and Yarkand, they were part of Kanishka's empire.
Correct.
So they were part of the Indian empire in the first century. So you see, that is history. Now, when we teach our history, we should put those facts very, very clearly across. China was not there. We were there. Instead of getting defensive, as you very rightly said. So I think we have got absolutely no reason to be defensive. Tibet certainly needs to be an independent country. But in my personal experience, having served in the border there, the way the infrastructure has come up, the way the economics has come up, the way the people education system has come up, I don't see any of the Tibetan people there getting up to revolt. That is my personal view.
Yes, so you have the carrot and you have the stick, and you do the brainwashing not over a couple of months, you do it over generations. That's how the Chinese do it. What are they doing? The same thing the Qing dynasty tried in Xinjiang was to occupy the cities, disperse the local population, fill it with Han traders, and then ensure that a DNA change happen. Exactly what the Chinese CCP is doing right now. Lock up the men, force the women to marry Han Chinese, ensure the commercial establishments are run by the Chinese, and then do the massive infrastructure projects, which will be the new Silk Road, to seal that region forever. Tibet has been conquered with concrete and steel, not just at the barrel of a gun. Quick last word, Baswati Mukherjee, on Professor Nalapat's point, that at some point of time, this is an important narrative with which we have to have a global agreement on.
I fully agree with you, and I'd like to say that it is Prime Minister Modi for the first time who has finally laid to rest the long shadow of 1962. Because until he became PM, we had this 1962 thing hanging on our psyche. It affected all of us, including people like me in the Foreign Service. So the point is, we have now understood that 62 is behind us. We have to go forward. And the Chinese understand now that 62 is behind us. It's not the same India. And therefore, we have to work out a strategy to pressure them point by point in a strategic manner, just in the same way as they do to us, because they are very good. They work everything out in advance. I'm sure that what they planned in Ladakh must have been part of a greater strategy. We don't know what else they have in store for us. Maybe same time next
10
year.
year, 20
Yes.
year, there's a 2049 plan. We have to be equally aware of all these things. So I'm going to make a request to anybody watching this. This is our Facebook page. You can find us NewsX on this is the Twitter page, NewsX on Twitter. You'll find this tweet pinned to the top. It has this map on it. It's got 151 retweets, 252 likes already since we begun this telecast. I would recommend please join us and help spread this. This is putting out a version of events that needs to be told globally equally. Let me also take the opportunity to quickly open. This is our Facebook page, and again it's pinned at the top. So please do share this as widely as you can. And this is a video that's going to be going up on YouTube. So if you're watching this on YouTube, share this as widely as you can. Send it to all your friends and colleagues who live all over the world so that this message comes across.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.